You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we got news in court today that is a huge blow for one of Donald Trump's biggest stated priorities. Can you explain what happened in the courtroom?
Yeah, Brian, a big loss for the Trump administration. We heard him prattle on endlessly during the campaign about how he was going to shut down the Department of Education. Well, a federal court judge just said, no, you're not. He put a stop to the efforts of the Trump administration to get rid of the department altogether. The first step they took was they laid off fully half of the staff of the Department of Education, something like 1,300 employees. Well, now a judge has ordered that those employees must be reinstated, and the Trump administration must stop all of its efforts to shut down the Department of Education because it was an agency created by Congress, funded by Congress, and it can't be shut down without congressional action. So this is a big loss for Donald Trump.
And before we get into the next question, just want to say thank you to you. I know that, obviously everybody can hear at this point that you're battling a cold here. So really appreciate you, powering through to make sure that everybody leaves here just a little bit better informed than we were in the beginning. So I appreciate you doing this and being here. I do want to talk about this idea that, okay, now we have a judge who has demanded the reinstatement of these more than 1,000 Department of Education employees. We have seen before that Trump is handed down a ruling by a judge, and yet he opts to just defy that ruling. And so what happens here? Do we have to wait for Trump to make good on what this ruling that was handed down was? Is there some enforcement mechanism, or is this going to be a similar situation to the Kilmer-Abrego-Garcia situation where, a judge rules that he has to be released and Trump opts not to do it, and then we engage in this months-long process to litigate this issue that should have been open and shut?
Yeah, Brian, we've seen this movie before, haven't we? We can expect two things from the Trump administration. One, an immediate appeal of the judge's ruling, and two, a whole bunch of foot-dragging and at least flirting with defying the judge's order to reinstate those 1,300 employees and take no further steps to shut down the Department of Education. I think those things are inevitable, but I'll tell you, the pattern that is emerging, Brian, with federal judge after a federal judge, literally from coast to coast, ruling against Donald Trump's lawlessness and unconstitutionality, I think helps the sort of ball of justice gain mass, gain speed, gain momentum. And, the courts more and more seem to have Donald Trump's number. And what really hurts the Trump administration from accomplishing any of these dirty deeds is they keep sending third-rate DOJ lawyers into court, and they're falling flat on their face. And they're being contradicted by Donald Trump, and in this instance, by the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. Let me give you a quick example. The Trump DOJ lawyers went in and argued, no, Judge, we're not trying to shutter. We're not trying to close down the Department of Education. We're just trying to get after executive branch bloat. This is just being efficient. So what was some of the evidence that was involved in this litigation? Well, when Donald Trump signed the executive order impacting the Department of Education back in March, he said, quote, "This is the first step to eliminating the agency." But it gets even better because Secretary Linda McMahon said that these mass layoffs were part of the Department of Education's, quote, "final mission." To me, sounds a lot like they're trying to eliminate the Department of Education.
And so knowing that the Trump administration has such a proclivity to ignore these rulings, is that something that judges could take into account in how they facilitate subsequent rulings? Like, we already can see how Trump has dealt with the issue of Kilmer-Abrego-Garcia. And so how does that impact how this judge in this case might take that into account? Or is it just a completely separate case? You're not allowed to even accept any atmospheric information, in these other cases, and you just have to give Trump the benefit of the doubt anew?
It's a great question, Brian. So once there is one litigant, and in this case, the one litigant is the federal government, the Trump administration, as represented by the Department of Justice. Once there is one litigant, that has shown itself to be unwilling to play by the rules, unwilling to abide by court orders in case after case after case, judges can absolutely start taking into account that pattern that emerges with respect to that one litigant, even in cases that are independent of one another. There's actually a doctrine in the law called the vexatious litigant. And it's when one litigant goes into court and abuses the process over and over and over again in some way, doesn't abide by the rules, doesn't abide by deadlines, doesn't abide by court orders. There is actually a mechanism where the courts can litigate whether that person should be deemed a vexatious litigant and should lose their ability to litigate in the federal courts. I'm not saying it's going to go that far, but I do, as I say, I think the federal judiciary is sitting up, taking notice of how Donald Trump is operating, and it's not in good faith. And things are only going to get worse for him moving forward, not better.
Glenn, can we expect an appeal in this case, or is this ruling final and to some degree, if they can figure out an enforcement mechanism, enforceable?
I do believe that this order can be appealed, will be appealed. But, you know, when you have that one litigant talking out of both sides of its mouth, with Trump and McMahon clearly signaling, we're shutting the damn agency down, and Trump's lawyers, DOJ lawyers, going in and saying, no, we're not shutting the agency down. I kind of like the petitioner's chances on appeal if an appeal is filed.
What do you make of the fact that even these Republican judges, even these conservative judges, are, in case after case, we've even had instances where Trump-appointed judges themselves have been the ones to push back on these extrajudicial activities that Trump is trying to engage in. And so what do you make of the fact that the judiciary is largely standing up to Donald Trump?
You know, judges know lawlessness and unconstitutionality when they see it, and they are seeing it in spades from Donald Trump. I will say, in my 30 years as a prosecutor, I practiced before lots and lots of presidentially appointed judges. And when they put on that robe, the vast majority of them leave their personal ideology, their political views and preferences behind, and they really do base their decisions only on the facts, the rule of law, and the Constitution. And that's what these judges are doing one after another, including, as you say, Trump-appointed judges.
And so what are next steps here? Do we have to, is there some deadline where Donald Trump has to comply, or is it kind of an open-ended question, and then if and when he decides not to comply, we engage in further litigation?
Yeah, I think the judge essentially ordered the Trump administration to reinstate these people. I didn't see in the reporting a date by which they had to reinstate these wrongfully terminated employees, and to take no further steps to shut down the Department of Education. So I think, you know, the inference is these efforts have to begin immediately, but I suspect you're going to see within the next 24 to 48 hours the Department of Justice file an appeal of this injunction.
Okay, well, we will, of course, stay on top of this. Something tells me that this isn't the last that we're going to hear of Trump's efforts as it relates to shutting down the Department of Education, so we will, of course, stay on top of this issue. Glenn, thank you for braving the cold to come speak with us today and, again, make us a little better informed on this issue. For everybody who's watching, one small step that we can all take to show some appreciation for Glenn braving the cold is to subscribe to his YouTube channel. I'm going to put the link to both of our channels right here on the screen. If you are not yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. That's the best way to support our work and to support independent media more broadly. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.